Everyone tells me family is forever. But when your own sister rewrites your life into her fiction, when strangers cheer her on for your pain, you start to wonder if blood really means anything at all. August 3rd was supposed to be the brightest, most perfect day of my entire life. 43 of our closest friends and family, soft jazz humming in the background, the venue glowing just right like something out of a movie. And Emily, my Emily, looked like she had been carved out of a dream. I'd spent years grinding for this, working brutal consulting gigs, sleeping on cold airport benches, taking insultingly low paychecks just to stay in the game. Finally, I had something to show for it. For once, I thought I could stand tall and celebrate. But Bethany? My sister? She saw it differently. She arrived late, ceremony already over. I should have known right then something was off. She walked in wearing this gold, backless dress that screamed high school prom night, not family wedding. No smile, no congratulations, not even a hello. Just grabbed a glass of champagne and slinked off to a corner like she was auditioning for Mysterious Villain of the Year. I caught her eye once, but it wasn't a sister's glance, it was like I was a stranger on the street. And if you knew Bethany the way I do, you'd know, silence was always the warning shot. 3 weeks earlier, she'd called me sobbing. Her car had broken down again. This was after I'd already lent her $1,200 in April for repairs. This time, she said she needed a whole new one. Urgent, of course. Always urgent. And I told her no. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I was sick of being her emergency fund, her backup plan. She wasn't even trying anymore, skipping classes, partying with people twice her age, spinning lies to our parents about finding herself. She hung up on me without a goodbye, but I didn't think she'd drag that grudge into my wedding day. Foolish me. I always gave her the benefit of the doubt. She waited for her moment. And oh, she chose it perfectly. I stood to give my toast, my chance to thank everyone, to speak about love, about peace, about building a life with someone who makes the chaos quiet. I barely raised my glass before Bethany stood too. For one split second, I thought, stupidly, that maybe she wanted to make a toast of her own. Instead, she hurled her champagne. The glass sailed across the room like she'd practiced the throw. It exploded against the dessert table, spraying bubbles and glass everywhere. It hit the photo frame of me and Emily on a Maui cliff, shattering it into glittering shards. Before anyone could react, Bethany stormed over and shoved the wedding cake with both hands, flipping it like it had personally wronged her. 3 tiers of delicate sugar work, hours of custom flower detailing, toppled and splattered across the floor. The sound of it hitting the ground was worse than a plate smashing, because that sound was my wedding collapsing with it. Then she locked eyes with me. Dead, unwavering. And she screamed, loud enough for people outside the venue to hear. This is what you get for acting like you're better. And then, silence. The kind of silence that eats you alive. I could hear someone's phone buzzing. Guests were frozen, wide-eyed, like maybe this was some kind of performance art, some prank we'd all laugh about later. But it wasn't. My mom? She sprinted toward Bethany like she'd just survived a car crash, wrapping her up in this melodramatic hug. She just needs to let it out, she whispered, as if Bethany was some wounded hero instead of the wrecking ball she really was. Emily's parents stared at me, stared like they weren't sure anymore what kind of family their daughter was marrying into. My best man didn't move. Even the DJ, bless him, just killed the music and froze. Bethany didn't apologize. Didn't shed a single tear. She just straightened herself like she'd scored a victory and walked out. No shame, no remorse. And me? I said nothing. Not because I was speechless, but because I refused to let her turn my wedding into her courtroom. This wasn't her stage, and I wasn't about to give her the performance she wanted. So, I smiled, weak, but steady. Leaned down and whispered to Emily that everything would be okay. Nodded to the coordinator to keep things moving. And the rest of the night, limped along. Some guests danced, some pretended nothing happened, but the truth? The memory was already poisoned. Stamped in ink. That night, though, when the lights dimmed and the guests went home, I made a decision nobody expected. Bethany thought she'd humiliated me. But by the next morning, she'd learn what humiliation really felt like. That night, when Emily and I finally got home, the air was heavy. She was quiet, too quiet. She slipped out of her gown and asked me softly, "Are you okay?" I told her I was fine. But the truth? I wasn't. I wasn't broken either. I was locked in. Focused. While she changed, I opened my laptop. My hands didn't even shake. I went straight into the university's online portal, the one where I'd made Bethany's tuition deposit just a month earlier. A neat little $9,400 gift to help her future. Click. Withdrawn. Gone. Next stop, the rental site. The lease I had co-signed for her apartment, my name, my credit, my safety net. I logged in, locked the account, flagged it for review. No approval, no payments, nothing moving forward. Rent due in 5 days. Lease? Frozen. At exactly 8:40 the next morning, my phone lit up. Bethany. I let it ring. Then the texts came. What the hell? Why is the portal locked? I can't access anything. Did you do this? I didn't reply. Because this wasn't the end. This was the opening act. By her 6th text, the tone had shifted, no more fake confusion. The last one just said, "Fix this." I set my phone down, muted the notifications, and made coffee. The silence in the kitchen was better than music. I didn't tell Emily what I'd done, not because I wanted to keep secrets, she would have supported me, but because I wanted one quiet morning to enjoy the peace of finally cutting the cord. The wedding chaos was over. And for the first time in years, I wasn't Bethany's safety net. Around noon, my mom called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, her voice dripping with concern. Your sister's very upset. She feels abandoned. Call me. Abandoned? That word almost made me laugh. She wasn't abandoned when I co-signed her lease. Not when I paid her tuition deposit. Not when I covered her overdraft fees, or rescued her from that botched Airbnb fiasco, or wired her $500 just until Friday, which turned into 4 weeks of silence. Nobody called me back then to ask how I felt. Bethany didn't reach out again for 2 days. Then she showed up. Emily peeked through the peephole and saw her pacing outside our door. Bethany started banging, loud, rhythmic, like a kid picking a fight on the playground. After 10 minutes, Emily cracked the door, just enough to speak. What do you want? She asked. Bethany didn't bother with hello. She launched into a list of demands. She said she had 5 days to cover rent, that her summer job money was already gone, that she was counting on that tuition deposit. She said I had no right to pull it, that I had a moral obligation to follow through. Emily, calm as ever, told her I wasn't home. That was a lie. I was sitting in the living room, listening to every word. But I wasn't about to play courtroom through a crack in the door. Not until Bethany showed some shred of remorse, which she didn't. She stormed off, shouting about legal rights, yelling that I couldn't just pull everything without warning. But she was wrong. I'd read the lease, front to back. I wasn't just a co-signer, I was the primary. She was the resident. Legally, she had no power. I could pull the plug. And I had. 3 more days crawled by before Bethany found her next move. This time, it wasn't a call or a text. It was an email. Subject line. Are you seriously doing this? Inside, she unloaded a whole spreadsheet of her so-called upcoming expenses. Tuition, rent, utilities, she laid it all out like she was my accountant. Then came the pitch, reinstate the tuition, unfreeze the lease, make it right. If I didn't, she said she'd have no choice but to drop out of the semester. And if she got evicted? That would be my fault. And then came the guilt trip. She claimed she'd ruined my wedding because she was overwhelmed, that I should have understood. She wrote that I was the only one in the family with real money, and that I was letting it go to my head. I didn't even waste words. I just forwarded the email to Emily with a quick note. Your turn to read the circus. That's when Bethany decided emails weren't enough. She showed up again. This time, she timed it so she could tail Emily when she came home from work. As Emily unlocked the door, Bethany tried to slip in behind her like some kind of thief. Emily didn't scream. She didn't panic. She grabbed Bethany by the arm, dragged her straight back into the hallway, and told her flat out, if she ever tried that again, she'd call the police. Then, without so much as a warning, Emily grabbed a fistful of Bethany's hair and shoved her down the hall. No dramatic speech, no wasted breath. Just raw, clean force. Bethany shrieked, stumbled, flailed like she'd just been blindsided, but Emily? She didn't even blink. She closed the door, locked it, and turned the deadbolt with the same energy you'd use after tossing out a trash bag. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. This time, it was my dad. He started with a heavy sigh, like he was the victim of all this, and said, Look, we need to talk about your sister. I asked him point blank, what exactly do you want to talk about? He said Bethany was spiraling. That I needed to help her land. That what she did at the wedding wasn't personal, it was just emotions. He said I was old enough now to be the bigger person. I told him I'd already been the bigger person for years. He said not to punish her for a single bad moment. I told him it wasn't a moment. It was a pattern. When he started rambling about family unity, I hung up. Because by then, I knew something my parents refused to admit, Bethany wasn't spiraling. She was just, finally falling. After Emily threw Bethany out, we didn't dissect it. There were no long talks or tears. We were just quiet. I poured her a glass of wine, we sank into the couch, and we let the silence breathe. But I felt something shift between us. Not in a bad way, no, in the best way. It felt settled. Like Emily had just carved a line in permanent ink, and now, neither of us had to wonder where she stood. Bethany didn't show up the next day. But she didn't vanish either. She shifted her aim, from me to Emily. The text started rolling in. Not angry this time, not explosive. No, she dressed them up like apologies. Long little paragraphs with fake maturity laced between guilt trips. And every single one ended the same way, in some form of, he owes me. Emily ignored them all. For messages in, she blocked her number without hesitation. Bethany didn't stop. She pivoted again, this time running to my parents. She texted them saying she'd been physically attacked and treated like a stray dog by Emily. She spun it so it looked like she'd come over to reconcile, and Emily had ambushed her. That's when the group chat was born. My dad added all of us, me, Emily, Mom, and Bethany, into one messy little digital battlefield. His first message was classic dad diplomacy, let's have an honest talk without yelling or blocking. We are still a family. Bethany jumped in first. Claimed she was hurt. Claimed she only acted out at the wedding because she felt invisible. She wanted someone to finally acknowledge how forgotten she'd felt. Then she went for the jugular, said I'd been rubbing my success in her face for years. My mom followed. Her message was drenched in that tired, soft guilt trip she'd perfected. She told me it was time to move forward, to forgive, because Bethany was still finding herself. She ended it with, she's still your baby sister. Emily didn't type a word. She just left the chat. I sat staring at the screen, watching those messages glow back at me, like they expected me to cave. And then I typed exactly 3 sentences. She's not a baby. She's 22. And she needs to learn the cost of disrespect. After that? Silence. No replies. No typing bubbles. Just that strange digital quiet that somehow feels louder than a screaming match. 2 days later, I heard through my cousin what I'd already guessed. Bethany had packed up and left her apartment. Couldn't pay the rent. Couldn't find a subletter. The leasing office called me for the final paperwork. I didn't fight it. I signed what I needed to, protected my credit, and moved on. But the kicker came a week later. Bethany re-enrolled in school. Not under my name this time, under my parents'. Turns out, after all the speeches about how we don't have the same opportunities you do, after all the guilt they shoveled onto me, they just paid her tuition themselves. No big family meeting. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just swiped their card and handled it quietly. So, they had the money all along. They just didn't want to spend it on her when they could squeeze it out of me instead. And that was the moment I was done. Not furious. Not bitter. Just clear. That night, Emily and I sat out on the balcony, drinking cheap wine out of mismatched glasses and eating leftover pasta straight from the container. I told her it felt like I'd been carrying a 10-year weight on my back, and it had finally slipped off. She smiled at me, leaned back in her chair, and said, "Good. Now we can live." And for the first time in years, I believed her. About a week after Bethany finally packed up and left her apartment, everything went eerily still. No more angry texts at midnight, no pounding on our door, no surprise guilt trip voicemails. For the first time in what felt like forever, the storm clouds parted. I could breathe again. Then my mom called. No greeting. No warmth. Just, "You'll be at your father's birthday next Saturday, right?" Like nothing had happened. Like my wedding hadn't been hijacked. Like Bethany hadn't smashed a cake in front of 40 people and screamed my humiliation loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I hesitated, told her I wasn't sure. That's when she dropped it. "Bethany will be there. I want you two to talk like adults. And I want you to stop being so cold." Cold. That's what stuck. I wasn't the one who turned a wedding into a demolition derby. I wasn't the one who had leeched off family for 3 years straight. I was just the one who finally said enough. And somehow, that's who they had a problem with. I hung up without agreeing to anything. That night, Emily and I cooked dinner. We didn't even mention it until we were halfway through eating. She set her fork down, looked at me, and said flatly, "We shouldn't go." I agreed instantly. But Friday night, the night before the party, Bethany managed to outdo herself. She sent me a Venmo request. $1,800. Label, "For the cake and broken frame LOL. Let's just call it even." I didn't even react. Just slid my phone across the table to Emily and walked out to the balcony, trying not to laugh, trying not to scream. When I came back, Emily had the calmest look on her face. I asked her what she'd written back. She just shrugged and said, "She's not going to like it." 15 minutes later, Bethany blocked us both on everything. We didn't go to my dad's birthday. But Bethany did, and apparently, she made sure people noticed. She showed up in a white jumpsuit that looked dangerously close to a wedding dress. Cousin Cara sent us a photo with the caption, "She's not okay." Apparently, Bethany paraded some random real estate guy she'd known all of 2 weeks, telling half the guests they were moving in together. The other half she told, over and over, "Big things are coming." Like a broken record. And Monday morning, we found out what those big things were. Bethany had launched a podcast. The title? Bloodline Bruises, Growing Up with the Golden Child. She dropped a teaser trailer on Instagram and TikTok. The voiceover was pure drama. I thought family meant safety. Sometimes the most toxic people are the ones you share a last name with. It was theatrical to the point of parody, but she wasn't finished. At the end of the video, she thanked a sponsor, a therapy app. The exact same one I had introduced her to a year earlier when she'd called me from the bathroom of a bar, sobbing about a panic attack. She'd landed a real deal. The company reposted her video. Within 24 hours, she'd racked up over 10,000 views. Comments flooded in, people calling her brave, thanking her for sharing her story, saying they related, asking her for advice. And me? I didn't care about the podcast itself. But watching it unfold, watching strangers cheer her on for rewriting our lives into her performance piece, I felt something twist in my gut. Like I wasn't just losing control of the story. Like I was slowly being written into somebody else's fiction. Then came the twist I never saw coming. She emailed me. The subject line read, "Let's talk." The body was barely 2 sentences long. "I'd like to meet. No drama, just a conversation. I have things I want to tell you. I think you'll be proud of me." No accusations. No name calling. No manipulative guilt tripping. Just calm, almost sterile wording. It didn't even feel like Bethany. Emily read it twice before saying, "She's not trying to fix anything. She's setting a trap." I believed her. So I replied with one line, "Emily will be there, too." Bethany never wrote back. But deep down, I knew that silence wasn't the end. It was the wind pulling back before the next storm. And I was right. 3 days later, my parents showed up at our apartment. No call. No text. No warning. Just rang the bell at 7:15 p.m., right in the middle of dinner. When I opened the door halfway, my dad gave this awkward little wave, like he was just dropping by for coffee. My mom stood behind him with her purse strapped across her shoulder like she'd packed for the night. She smiled and said, "We just want to talk calmly." I told them they had 3 minutes. They walked in anyway. Emily stayed in the kitchen, arms crossed, silent. No fake smile, no small talk. She didn't need to say a word. Everyone in the room already knew where she stood. My mom started. She launched into this rehearsed monologue about Bethany being in a transformative period. About how she'd made mistakes but regretted them deeply. She said the podcast wasn't personal, it was just Bethany's way of processing. I shouldn't take it so seriously. Then my dad chimed in. "She wants a relationship with you. She just doesn't know how to say it." I asked him point blank, did Bethany actually say that? Or are you just hoping I'll believe it? Neither of them answered. And then my mom dropped the bomb. She's moved back in with us. Just temporarily, until she figures things out. Emily let out a sharp, audible breath from the kitchen. And in that moment, the whole picture snapped into focus. They'd paid her tuition. They'd let her move back home. And now, they weren't here to mediate anything, they were here to manage me. To make sure I didn't make her life harder than it already was. They weren't protecting family peace. They were protecting their image. So I asked them flat out, have either of you actually told her what she did at the wedding was wrong? My mom shook her head. She was overwhelmed. My dad muttered, she didn't mean to ruin it. I repeated myself, slower this time. Did either of you tell her it was wrong? They didn't speak. That silence told me everything. They weren't angry at her. They were embarrassed by her. And the easiest way to scrub away that embarrassment was simple, push it onto me. I looked my parents in the eye and told them I was done. Done with the money, done with the guilt trips, done with the endless cycle of bailing Bethany out. If they wanted to bankroll her life, fine. But it wasn't going to come from me ever again. I told them, plain and sharp, you did a great job raising a daughter who believes consequences don't exist. Then I pointed at the door. They hesitated, hovering like maybe they'd push back, but eventually they left. Bethany never reached out after that. Not directly, anyway. But her podcast? That kept rolling. Episode 2 was all about narcissistic siblings. Episode 3? When they make you look crazy. Emily and I actually laughed at that one. The irony was too perfect. A few days later, I pulled up our own lease. 8 months left. I glanced at our savings, ran the numbers, and turned to Emily. Let's take a trip. Somewhere far. Somewhere warm. Somewhere that has nothing to do with any of this mess. She didn't even hesitate, just smiled. The next morning, we booked 2 round-trip flights to the Maldives. 6 weeks out. No family. No drama. Just peace. The kind of peace that feels earned, not borrowed. 2 days before we were set to fly, Bethany finally broke the silence. One last text. Just a single fire emoji. No words. No explanation. No context. Like she was trying to drop some cryptic warning, or maybe just remind me she was still out there, watching. I showed Emily while we were picking out luggage tags. She didn't even blink. She just scanned her boarding pass at the counter and said, perfect. Let it burn. I blocked Bethany's number right then. That was the last loose thread tied off before the trip. And from everyone else? Silence. My dad didn't call. My mom sent one generic, hope you're well, text that I ignored. No more lectures. No more guilt trips. I think they finally understood. I wasn't going to be the one to fix what they broke. Not this time. We left for the Maldives on a Thursday morning. No layovers, no rushing through terminals, no scrambling with boarding passes. Just smooth air travel, the kind you almost don't believe exists. I sat there watching Emily sleep against the window, her head tilted just so, as endless blue water stretched out beneath us. And for the first time in years, my mind wasn't racing. No rescue plans, no spreadsheets in my head, no strategy for who needed saving next. Just quiet. Our bungalow was literally over the water. You could hear the ocean pulsing beneath the floorboards at night, like a heartbeat reminding you the world was still alive. Inside, there was a little wooden sign, no clocks. Let time be yours again. I stared at it longer than I should have. It landed heavier than I expected. We didn't mention Bethany. Not once. Not until day 4. We were having breakfast on the deck, sun warming our shoulders, waves lapping below, birds calling overhead, when Emily set her coffee cup down and asked, do you think they'll ever admit it? I didn't need to ask who she meant. No, I said. But I think they know. And I really believe they do. Not in a reflective, self-aware way. More like that quiet guilt people carry when their scapegoat finally walks away. They knew I was always the one cleaning up her wreckage. They knew they let it happen because it was easier than saying no. And now? Now they knew they couldn't lean on me anymore. Bethany stayed with them. Never found a new apartment. The lease expired without drama. The management company just relisted the unit after I signed the final confirmation. She didn't call. No thank you, no sorry. She never will. And I've stopped waiting. I don't need her apology. What I needed was for the cycle to end. Her podcast stumbled forward a little longer. 2 more episodes. One about being erased by your support system. Another about financial abuse inside families. I didn't listen, but cousin Cara did. She said Bethany stretched the truth so far it snapped. Listeners drifted. Comments dried up. The sponsor pulled out. And then, silence. Digital and real. I stopped checking her socials. My mom stopped sending her barbed group texts. My dad, when he did call once about a mechanic, never even mentioned her name. Cara told me later Bethany went back to part-time classes on my parents' dime, this time funded by some rainy day savings account they'd been sitting on all along. I almost laughed. Turns out they had it, they just never wanted to spend it, not until I refused. When Emily and I came home, it was like walking into a new chapter. We moved into a better place, quieter, further from the city. No buzzing phones, no constant requests for money, no old ghosts breathing down my neck. Just us. I got a new credit card. Stopped being anyone's cosigner. Changed my bank password for the first time in 6 years. No more surprise withdrawals. No more Venmo requests labeled, please don't ask. We don't talk about the wedding anymore. We don't need to. It's a smudge on a page we've already turned. These days, we sit on our new porch at night, sipping wine, watching the neighbor's dog chase moths under the light. We talk about books, trips, Emily's business ideas, real things. that old life doesn't even feel like mine anymore. It feels like something I read once. A story that belonged to somebody else. Sometimes, you don't fight the fire. You don't rush in with buckets of water, trying to save what's already ash. Sometimes, you just let it burn itself out. And when it's over, you walk away. Finally warm.